How could one aircraft carrier appear in almost every major phase of the Pacific War and survive? The short answer is not that Enterprise was unsinkable. She survived because a carrier was a moving airfield inside a much larger system. Her position kept changing. Radar, fighters, and escorting ships fought threats before they reached her. Her crew learned how to contain fire and flooding, repair ships and shipyards, return damaged machinery to service, and on several terrible days, bombs simply missed the spaces that would have killed her. That combination carried Enterprise more than 275,000 miles during the war, but a line that long can hide the real story. So keep watching the small map in the corner. It is an operational schematic, not a daily track. Each move matters only when it changes the danger, the mission, or the chance to repair. Enterprise entered service in 1938 as hull number CV-6. Before the war, her aircraft teams practiced an endless cycle: fuel, arm, launch, recover, repair, and begin again. That cycle was the carrier's real weapon. The ship was not a battleship with a flat roof. It was a mobile system for putting trained air crews over a point hundreds of miles away. In late November 1941, Enterprise left Pearl Harbor carrying Marine fighters to Wake Island. She launched them on 4 December and turned back toward Hawaii. Heavy seas delayed the return. On the morning of 7 December, the carrier was roughly 200 miles west of Oahu, not safely hidden by some master plan. She began launching a routine search. Her dive bombers reached the island while the Japanese attack was underway. Some were shot down, others landed wherever they could. So the first survival lesson is uncomfortable. Enterprise missed the harbor attack because a delivery mission and bad weather put her at sea. Movement saved the hull. Did not remove her people from the battle. The carrier spent the first months of 1942 moving through a Pacific in which the United States had very few flight decks. She covered convoys, struck the Marshall Islands, raided Wake and Marcus, and screened Hornet during the Doolittle raid. Every mission consumed aircraft, fuel, spare parts, and trained people. Every return to Pearl Harbor became a chance to add guns, repair machinery, and absorb lessons. Survival worked in layers. Search aircraft and radar tried to find an attack early. Fighters met it at distance. Escorting ships added anti-aircraft fire. The carrier turned at high speed to make a bomber's solution harder. Below deck, watertight boundaries limited flooding, while repair parties waited for whatever passed through the outer defenses. No layer was perfect. Their value came from forcing an attacker to defeat several different systems in sequence. Then came Midway. On 4 June. Enterprise turned into the wind and launched bombers and torpedo aircraft. The torpedo crews attacked first and suffered devastating losses. Their courage did not magically cause the later success, but it was part of a confused battle that pulled Japanese fighters low and scattered attention. Enterprise dive bombers eventually found the enemy carriers. Aircraft from Enterprise attacked Kaga and Akagi, while Yorktown's group struck Soryu. Enterprise aircraft later helped attack Huryu. The decisive blows happened far beyond the American flight decks. That is the second reward hidden inside the route. A carrier survived partly by sending its combat power away from itself. Its hull did not need to duel another carrier within sight. Scouting, timing, communications, and crews in the air turned distance into both a weapon and a shield. Midway was not Enterprise acting alone. Yorktown, Hornet, submarines, patrol aircraft, intelligence teams, and many other units shaped the battle. But Midway showed what Enterprise had become: a mobile launch point that could change the war without ever seeing the ships it struck. The distance shield failed in the Solomons. On 24 August 1942, during the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, more than 30 Japanese dive bombers attacked Enterprise in about 5 minutes. 3 bombs hit the ship. 4 more exploded close alongside. One detonation disabled the after elevator. Another ignited ready ammunition and drove fire across the gallery deck. Flooding, smoke, and heat helped knock out steering for 38 minutes. This was not a cinematic scratch. Men were killed, machinery stopped, the flight deck bent, yet repair parties isolated damage, fought the fires, and restored functions in layers. Enterprise began landing aircraft within an hour, then she withdrew to Pearl Harbor, where a dry dock and shore labor could do what the crew could not. The route reversed because survival required retreat. At Pearl Harbor, workers repaired battle damage, added anti-aircraft guns, and installed improved radar. Enterprise returned to the South Pacific in October. On the 26th at Santa Cruz, 24 dive bombers came through. 2 bombs hit. 2 damaging near misses distorted the hull, flooded fuel tanks, and shocked machinery. Hornet was lost in the same battle. But something had changed aboard Enterprise. The official damage study later emphasized the crew's preparation. They had removed combustible material, stripped paint, reduced paper and furniture, limited flammable stores above the waterline, and drilled the repair parties. Fires that could have spread were contained. Damage control did not prevent the hits. It prevented several hits from becoming one growing catastrophe. That distinction matters. Armor is something a ship has. Damage control is something a crew repeatedly does. The elevators reveal the difference. A carrier had to move aircraft between the hangar and flight deck, so an elevator opening was both essential machinery and a dangerous break in the deck. At Eastern Solomons, 2 elevators were disabled, but temporary flight deck work and the remaining elevator let operations resume. At Santa Cruz, another elevator was knocked out. Each repair preserved some ability to launch and recover aircraft. In May 1945, when the forward elevator and surrounding deck were finally demolished, the ship could float but could no longer do the job for which she existed. Enterprise reached Naumea with repair work still unfinished. Shipfitters from the repair ship Vestal, construction troops and the carrier's own crew worked continuously. Then the operational situation forced her back toward Guadalcanal before the job was complete. The forward elevator remained doubtful, and temporary partitions stood where permanent spaces had been destroyed. After Santa Cruz, Enterprise was the only surviving American fleet carrier in the South Pacific. That does not mean she fought Japan alone. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines, Henderson Field and repair units held the campaign together. It means the American carrier margin had narrowed to 1 damaged flight deck. In November, Enterprise aircraft supported the naval battle of Guadalcanal while work continued. This is the 3rd reward on the map. Repair was not a separate chapter after combat. In the emergency of 1942, repair, movement and combat overlapped. A carrier could be operational without being whole. By 1943, the pressure changed. New Essex-class carriers began arriving, and Enterprise could receive a deeper overhaul. When she returned, she was no longer the lone scarce deck of the previous autumn. She became one experienced unit inside a rapidly expanding fast carrier fleet. That changed how to read the long western movement in 1944. Enterprise took part in operations across the Central Pacific, including the Marshalls, Truk, the Marianas, and the Philippines. The map advances in large steps because the ship did not travel as a solitary hero. Oilers, ammunition ships, escorts, repair bases, and replacement aircraft made repeated strikes possible. Mobile logistics stretched the airfield far beyond any single island. That fleet system also changed what a return meant. Enterprise did not always need to cross the Pacific for every damaged aircraft or empty fuel tank. Replenishment and forward bases shortened the distance between combat and recovery. Serious structural work still demanded a yard, but routine maintenance, new air crews and consumable supplies could move toward the carrier. The famous miles therefore measure more than endurance. They measure how often a network restored the ship's ability to move again. The map cannot show every zigzag, refueling circle or search pattern, and it should not pretend to. What it can show is the rhythm of the campaign: advance, strike, withdraw, repair, and advance again. Enterprise survived not by following one perfect route, but by repeatedly leaving one kind of danger before the next mission began. Enterprise also changed jobs. By early 1945, she operated with a night carrier group. Her aircraft flew night combat air patrols and strikes, while the larger force maintained pressure around the clock. This altered the ship's daily rhythm. During daylight, aircraft could be secured and defueled, fuel lines drained and magazines closed. Those choices would matter when the attacks finally broke through. In March 1945, Enterprise struck targets in Japan and returned to Ulithi for repairs after bomb damage. In April, a kamikaze near Okinawa struck close enough to bend propeller shafts and damage machinery. The carrier withdrew, received temporary repairs, and returned in May with those shafts still bowed because forward bases could not perform the complete structural work. This is where the phrase unsinkable becomes most misleading. Enterprise kept returning because people accepted temporary limits, monitored damaged systems, and knew when a ship had to leave. Survival was an operating decision, not a magical property. Early on 14 May, Enterprise was southeast of Japan. Her fighters intercepted attackers, and the ship turned hard when a Japanese aircraft emerged from cloud and dived toward the forward elevator. The aircraft and its bomb tore through the flight deck. The blast threw much of the elevator hundreds of feet into the air, opened decks below, started fires and sent water through ruptured mains. 14 Americans were killed and 68 wounded. The repair parties had been at battle stations for hours. The hangar sprinklers came on. Aircraft were mostly defueled. Magazines were secured. Fires in the hangar were controlled in about 15 minutes and extinguished in about 30. The ship stayed afloat, but Enterprise could no longer launch aircraft from the damaged forward flight deck. The system had saved the ship without saving the mission. She left for Puget Sound, and the war ended while she was still under repair. That final hit gives us the most useful definition of survival. It is not the absence of damage. It is the ability to stop damage from cascading faster than people can respond. Sometimes that preserves combat power. Sometimes it preserves only the hull and the lives still aboard. After the war, Enterprise carried servicemen home in Operation Magic Carpet. She reached New York with aircraft packed on deck, now as cargo and display rather than weapons. Efforts to preserve the carrier eventually failed. She was sold for scrap in 1958. And the ship that had crossed the Pacific so many times made one last short journey to the breakers. So how did Enterprise survive 275,000 wartime miles? Movement kept changing the threat. Aircraft and escorts pushed defense outward. Repeated drills turned firefighting into immediate action. Repair ships, construction crews, and industrial yards converted damage into another return. Night operations sometimes left the ship in a safer material condition when attacks arrived. And chance still mattered. The official damage report noted that no bomb reached her magazines, gasoline tanks, or main machinery. Enterprise was not immortal. She was repeatedly made usable again. That is why the most important path on this map is not the line heading west. It is every line that turns back toward a repair base and then returns to the war. A carrier survived because thousands of people kept turning damage into time.